Coming up next on the CHGO Cubs podcast, Jed Hoyer has been busy making moves. P-Wizzy out, relief help in. Delmendo is late. Say it ain't snow. We're warming you up like a cold or warm hot chocolate, spiked a little bit. Lance Brozdowski coming in. We're next. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? Coming at you live on a Sunnyside Thursday. This is the CHGO Cubs Podcast. Visit sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 and older or Illinois medical card holders. Well, sunny, yes, somewhere, not in Chicago today. Snowy is what we call it. Very, very snowy. What was supposed to be a 30-minute commute was then a 50-minute commute. Was then a 2-hour and 15-minute commute.
Yeah.
Luke Stuckmeyer made it. Ryan Herrera made it.
20 minutes turned into over an hour.
That's not Cody. That's Emma, our social media guru.
Hello, everybody.
She slays all the time. She brought her blanket.
I'm slaying with my blanket.
Cody will be here eventually when he gets here. Sarah made it. She's got a winter hat on, running the ones and twos.
Hello.
Okay, we have a fun show for you. Usually I have everything all blocked out, ready to go. I'll be honest with you. What we have today is a great guest, total chaos, a live chat, and I have the ad reads ready to go.
And
do I have plans for what we're going to talk about? Not necessarily. Sometimes we wing it in the biz. Today is a wing it day, the first snowy day of the season, and it is miserable. All right, we're going to bring in our guest because, first of all, I feel bad. Asked him to come in the studio. He starts coming here. It's so treacherous. He's got to turn around and retreat. Lance Brozdowski from Marquee Network, huh?
Yeah.
Woo! What's going on?
Yes.
The commute was tough, man.
Not good, huh, Lance?
No, I have a small Toyota Camry. So I started leaving and I messaged and I was like, I think I'll be there like kind of on time. And then I turned the corner and was spinning like crazy. So we turned back in and we're doing this remote.
There we go.
Yes. And thank you for even agreeing to go back home and do it remotely. Lance does great work. You can see him all the time on Marquee Network. They have shows all winter long. They've got Cubs 360. They've got stuff coming up here, obviously, with the winter meetings.
Yep.
Coming up real soon. How busy have you been, Lance? Like, what's your day-to-day, first of all? When you get in and you get a schedule and you're like, all right, this is what I'm doing this week, how busy has it been for you since the end of the season?
I got to admit, usually towards the end of the season here in October and into November, it's slightly slow where we take a little bit and then you hit the World Series and then we start up kind of 2 times a week, Cubs 360 off-season shows. I help out with those. I'm on air. Bears shows a couple times a week. Mostly I help out on the video editing side there. I'm not really talent. I only play fantasy football, so I don't have too much in terms of to add about Shane Waldron or like Bears offense, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, we got a ton of cool stuff throughout the offseason for everybody. Check out our app, Marquee Sports Network app. Into next year, we'll have a lot of new programming as well coming down the pipe.
Awesome.
Before we get into all the Cubs stuff and a lot of moves, maybe not massive moves in the eyes of Cubs fans who are dreaming of a white Christmas and Juan Soto, but realistically, some smaller moves so far, but active. I wanted to ask you about something you posted on your Twitter, which was kind of throughout the season last year, multiple times, about command, right? Like just in general about baseball and how command is impacting the game right now, because we saw such a long stretch of pitchers starting to just throw heat, right? I mean, we saw everybody starting to throw 90. If you're not throwing 90, you're not throwing. You're telling me that command may come back into play soon too.
I think so. I think it relates to just the general concept. Like velocity is probably always going to be king just because of how I don't want to say easy it is to train, but just how fleshed out the ideas are behind how to train it. You could literally go online to like Driveline Baseball and pop up a program for velo, like if you're a high school kid, and probably gain a tick or two. And like maybe that's not the best way to gain velocity. It's just pick up an online a program, etc. But those ideas are so, they're just everywhere in the sport. You see that with the Dodgers winning in the minor leagues, they throw the hardest fastballs they have for the last couple of years. Like the success is very directly correlated to that. And I think eventually we're going to get a lot more focus on the biomechanics side, et cetera. Organizations trying to figure out how to train command specifically to get guys more in the zone. Because you see it all the time, right? In the minor leagues, you have the guy who's sitting 96 plus, but cannot dot the ball at all. And you just think conceptually of, if we can get that guy into the zone, he would be a better pitcher. I just don't think the structures in most organizations are repeatable in a way that you can get command better in a very oriented process, where in one offseason we know we can get you your walk rate down 3 percentage points. I just don't think it's as simple as that. It's much more simple on the velo side to be like, hey, if we focus on this for an entire offseason from a strength and conditioning standpoint, we can get you up a tick. That's very regimented. I think the command stuff eventually hopefully comes back to the forefront.
And when we talk about command, that's a good segue to talking about the big move the Cubs made yesterday, and trading for Eli Morgan of the Guardians. Had a good year this last year, obviously missed some time with a couple stints on the injured list, but has had a pretty solid major league career, has been a role player in that dominant Guardians bullpen. I'm curious, like he doesn't operate with elite velocity or anything like that in his fastball. He seems like a command pitcher. What do you know about him? What can you tell us about him, and how does he fit into this Cubs bullpen?
I like him. I thought it was a really good trade. I was actually, I think, a bit initially surprised at some of the pushback against, like, oh, they shouldn't have traded Alfonso Rosario and stuff. And I'm a prospect guy. I do a lot of stuff with Road Wrigley at Marquee, which is our kind of our minor league programming. And I'm totally fine trading Rosario. Like he's a really fun prospect. I think Kantrovitz in the scouting department nailed that pick in 2023. But he swings and misses a ton. He doesn't make any contact. And I get he posted, or there was a picture circulated in the offseason of him looking jacked. Like, yeah, but the plate approach is terrible and he misses a lot in the zone. So he's a project. Like, that is a guy that in 2 to 3 years we'll find out if he's even a major leaguer of some kind. You know, obviously the Guardians are taking that shot. That organization is very contact oriented. So this is kind of a deviation from that, probably to pick up a bit more upside. But you trade that for a surefire reliever who has a track record and you have 3 years of control over. He'll hit his ARB1 this coming offseason. I just think it's a good move. Like, they're trying to build out bullpen depth. If they're not going to pay for like a Tanner Scott or a Jeff Hoffman, who's been circulated as a starter, but let's talk about him as a reliever, like those guys in the $13 to $15 million AAV window, then you have to do this. You have to trade the guy who's 3 years away for the reliever you're going to have for the next 3 years. I think that one of the things maybe Council really liked here is that he's a multi-inning guy. I think over half his appearances last year with the Guardians were multi-inning. So I think that's big, where he's able to, go between lineups. He's a good lefty guy because of the changeup. He worked on a slider a lot. From what I can see from the results standpoint, it looks a lot better than it did in 2023, where he kind of got beat up a bit. So it's a fun mix. Like, it's four-seam slider, changeup. I think he's a good pitcher. I like the trade. I would have okayed this trade if I was Jed Hoyer, who I'm not.
Sometimes you do trade guys that you like. It's why going into this offseason, I've said, well, there aren't too many, if anybody, I believe, on the roster that should be a totally untouchable, because you don't know what the offer is going to be. If you're looking at it from Cleveland's side, what are maybe the drawbacks or negatives to Morgan? Why would they trade a dependable reliever when you know it's so important? They're a contending team. Why would they trade that player for a guy who's a project and not ready to help them now?
Well, they're just a bullpen factory. So I think it's more of like an expendable asset thing, where they just have so many of these guys. Like, they called him a guy in the postseason, Andrew Walters, who's like one of my favorite relievers in the minors. Like, he barely pitched in leverage. Like, he was like kind of a garbage man for them coming in when they were up or down by a lot. And like, that guy I think could be a leverage reliever. They have multiple other guys. They're leaving an unprotected guy, Ryan Webb, at AAA, who's more of a starter, low velocity guy. But I would imagine he might get scooped by an organization in the Rule 5 draft. They just are a pitching factory, to the point where I don't even think there was a pure negative on a guy like Morgan. I think it was more just, we will take on the upside of a bat that we don't have a lot of high variance bats in our organization. So let's just go in this direction. And we think Morgan's relatively expendable, and we think we got a good value here. So to me, it's almost like a trading from excess point rather than we see these massive flaws with Morgan. They made some good changes to him last year that I thought resulted in a pretty good season. So he's probably not a sub-2 ERA pitcher. Maybe he's like a low threes guy, but to get, if you could get 70 plus innings out of a guy like that, that's pretty valuable for the Cubs.
And you mentioned the changeup, and I keep seeing it everywhere. Like, he's got a really good changeup. He's got one of the best changeups in baseball. His changeup's elite. Like, what is it about the changeup? And you mentioned it works pretty well against lefties. Like, what is it about this changeup that makes it work so well against hitters?
Yeah, I'm gonna pop up his metrics on that. I'm not firing from the hip here, but the main thing that you look at from like a model standpoint with changeups is there's obviously like arm speed and deception and location, et cetera. Whenever I love talking about this with Ryan Dempster when we have him in, because he was obviously like a split guy and stuff. So we always talk about these concepts. Like I always ask him, like, what's the most important thing for a changeup? And he's like, arm speed. Like that's always the thing. He's got to match fastball. That is really hard to quantify on the data side, where we don't really have, an arm speed metric. You can't go on Baseball Savant and look up what's this guy's arm speed. It's just not publicly available. So on the public side, what we run into is like two things, like how much slower is the changeup than the pitcher's fastball, and how much more does it drop? Like those two variables are kind of how we construct a lot of changeups. So looking at Eli Morgan particularly, his changeup's a lot slower than his fastball. It's like 79 miles per hour, and it drops a ton more. It's like 14 inches to drop. The average is somewhere about like a 9 mile per hour difference and 11 inches of vertical break difference. So he has larger margins on both of those things. Yeah. Generally, when you're getting away from the average changeups, that's when models really like changeups. So Morgan overall, like I've heard some people call this like a Bugs Bunny changeup where it just moves like a ton. If you watch it from like a dead center angle, it like breaks a ton to his arm side. I wouldn't say it's like Kyle Hendricks changeup, but it's in that vicinity of being very aesthetically pleasing when he gets one like away from a lefty or even like down into a righty. He'll occasionally throw that. So those are like the things you metrically look at with a changeup, apart from the fact that if he has good location of it or if his arm speed matches. I'm obviously the data guy, so I'm not going to go into like the arm speed stuff. I leave that for the experts who've actually played at a high level.
Emma, do you have a question for Lance?
I actually do.
Oh boy, this should be good.
I do.
Oh,
Are you guys ready for this?
It's hops right in and it's firing off.
I know, I'm firing off these questions. All right, just one though. Do you see the Cubs following a similar trend to the Red Sox and completely ditching the four-seam fastball?
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. That's a fantastic question.
Thank you.
That is a game changer. That's a great question.
Didn't see that coming.
My answer is no. I don't think that they're going to follow the Red Sox trend. I think that a lot of that Red Sox trend was pushed by Andrew Bailey, who, if you look at the teams that have thrown the lowest amount of four-seam plus sinkers, like that grouping of fastballs, in basically the history of the sport, Andrew Bailey's, I think, been the pitching coach for 3 of the top 5 teams. There's the Giants in 23, the Red Sox last year, and I think the Giants in 2022. You got to fact check me on that, but I know he's up there at least in like the 3 of the top 6 or 7. And I think it's his philosophy generally. I also think it's a byproduct of like who the Red Sox had in their organization. They had a lot of these like crossfire sinker type guys. Whereas I would argue that the Cubs with Carter Hawkins are trying to maybe more push towards like the vertical four seam, pushing velocity, developing velocity, and really riding the four seam fastball. They've shown that in the minors in terms of how much they use fastballs. They've shown that with the velocity on their fastballs. So I kind of view it where I would say you could almost split minor league pitching into like the teams that like fastballs and want good fastballs would be like the Dodgers, the Rays, the Guardians. I think the Cubs are in there as well. And then you have the teams that are like, why on earth are you throwing that pitch? That's like the Red Sox, the Mariners. The Twins are to some extent in that category as well. So you can kind of like separate teams out. And I think the Cubs are much more aligned with the Guardians and Dodgers and Rays.
Well, those are teams I'd like to be aligned with. I tell you what.
Sure, right? Yeah.
We do have some ad reads coming up here, Lance, and just
to
be totally honest, with Emma's last question, because it was so good, I'm a little worried about my job security. So, Emma, if you would please leave the set, I would appreciate that, and don't ever come back.
I'm out. Thank you, and I am not Ryan's sister.
In the chat, they were asking if you guys were related. No, take your blanket and don't come back with your smart questions. We're about hot takes here.
Okay.
We're
Team Gen Z.
Team Gen Z. All right, Emma's going to be back. We're talking to the great Lance Brozdowski from Marquee Network. We're going to talk to him more in just a few minutes as we talk about some of the moves the Cubs made in the last 24 hours, or 48 hours even, which have been plentiful. But first, our great sponsors. Our friends at Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary are here to elevate your holiday season. Sunnyside is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. They have a crazy selection with over 100 different strains to choose from, with easy online ordering and in-store pickup. Now, wherever you are in our state of Illinois, Sunnyside has a location for you. They have spots as far south as Champaign. Might take you 6 hours to get there right now. And as far north as South Beloit. Might take you 7 hours to get there. Stop into the store nearest you for expert guidance from their staff or select from quality lines like Cresco and FloraCal. Available now. Good news, limited time offer, Island Vibes. Available in disposable vapes, 510 carts, and live resin gummies. Good news, Island Vibes for the next level staycations, destination relaxation. Good news, Island Vibes. And good news, Island Vibes, Puff Puff Paradise.
Oh,
didn't think I'd say that today. Cody's picking up some of Mini Seagal's award-winning chocolates at Sunnyside on his way home. It's been that kind of day. You can too by visiting sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter the promo code HICHGO to check out and qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary, bright buys every day, only for 21 and older or Illinois medical card holders. Some beers can say they're brewed for baseball. Only Blue Moon is brewed by baseball. Beer and baseball just go together, and no beer goes better than the one that was born in a ballpark. Blue Moon, created at Coors Field in Denver. It's a natural choice all season long. Blue Moon isn't just another beer. It's a whole different experience. Try what I call the Super Moon, a Blue Moon with a slice of orange in an ice-cold, frosty mug from your freezer at home. Why strike out with the same old beer when you can get something that's one of a kind? Bring the ballpark to you with Blue Moon Belgian-style wheat ale, one of a kind every time. Blue Moon, delivered by visiting get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO for your delivery options. Get.bluemoonbeer.com/CHGO. Made brighter. Celebrate responsibly. Blue Moon Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Nice. We are here with the great Lance Brozdowski, who, by the way, as we said at the top of the podcast, he tried to weather the storm. He tried to get here. We had a chair all lined up for him. It turned him back. Said, no, young man, go home. So he's gone home. Cody finally made it here. Cody, are you all right?
You let him go home? Lance lives in the same neighborhood as I do.
I didn't have a chance to text
you.
him.
You got there, Cody? Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. Did you ride your electric bike or you had the vehicle?
No, I drove. You think I'm an idiot? Come on.
Well, I don't know. It took you a long time.
Yeah.
Like it's taking a long time. Took me a long time.
Because it's a blizzard out there.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Cody's mad.
Cody's mad. I'm mad.
All right. We got a guest on the show.
We're here with Lance. He was just telling us about Morgan and his changeup and how he fits, and he likes the trade for the Cubs. One thing I was saying yesterday, first of all, for the people that were happy that Patrick Wisdom was DFA'd, it's okay if you want a different player and those things. Is he a wonderful person? Yes, wonderful person. That's the first thing anybody says about Patrick Wisdom.
Well, Lance does a lot of sideline stuff with Marquee. Like he's
a great guy. Like that, yeah. But most of all, I was also saying, Lance, he also provides raw power, something this team doesn't really have. I'm not saying it wasn't the right move to DFA him, but now where do you find that raw power from somebody within the organization or outside? Because you need more. Last year, you clearly needed more of it.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I right-handed power in particular. I think the Paredes trade is still a pretty interesting one to do some like retrospectives on over the next couple of years, where I almost wonder whether they just didn't really calculate as much of how much he pulled the ball and how much he'd be affected by the park. That's also like, I imagine you guys have talked about the park, but that is something that I'm fascinated to see how it plays next year, where it plays incredibly pitcher-friendly last season and was, I think, top 10 or 12 in baseball. Like, is it just going to net back out to neutral? Are you the weatherman here?
He hates the excuse.
Technically, I did do the weather at a TV station for a year, but that's another story. I just don't want to. Both teams played in it, and I know what you're saying. Did it affect the stats? But Lance, to the flip side of okay, guys didn't have enough power, and you didn't get as many home runs as you would have. Okay, we'll Shota be pitching as well as he did. Well, this year, next year, if the wind is doing the opposite, I mean, you got to take both sides.
Sorry,
right?
I interrupted your Paredes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We do that. We interrupt a lot.
No, you didn't interrupt me. I agree with you. I think it's just more interesting from the fact of, okay, like the staff was pretty good last year. Like they had terrible bullpen in May, et cetera. But the net of their team was like, I think they were top 12-ish in and bullpen ERA, and you're probably a little bit higher on starter ERA side. Like they were a good pitching staff, you know? So it's like if that goes back to neutral, then I'm a little bit more worried about like Tyone and some of these other guys that lingered with like good results, but peripherals didn't necessarily back it up. Like, is Shota going to break a 3 ERA again? Like, I think that's pretty unlikely if this park plays neutral, especially with the home runs he allows. He's still going to be a good pitcher. Like, he's still going to be well above average, but 170 innings of a 2.91 ERA is like, that is better than anybody thought, I imagine from an expectation standpoint. So I agree with you. It's not even an excuse. It's just more, if the park plays neutral, how does this affect the team? And maybe that pushes up some of the power, and maybe maybe Paredes gets back to 20 home runs. I don't think he's going to end up being a 30 home run guy at Wrigley Field. It's just not going to happen with the wind, in my opinion. But I don't know if that happens. Like, maybe you do get back some power, but then on the pitching side, maybe the staff ends up being more neutral. And maybe that's why they're pushing towards, wanting depth at starter, going after maybe an Eovaldi or someone along those lines and adding them into the rotation to raise the floor and not have to rely on a Ben Brown or a Jordan Wicks who are still developing for that 4-5 spot, et cetera.
Yeah. Oh, now you've got us excited talking about starting pitchers.
Well, I mean, to add on to the power question and the point about the power, and how much can we expect Owen Casey to really contribute in that area? Like, obviously, it just got added to the 40-man. You're a prospect guy, as you said. Like, you know all about Owen Casey. But how much can we reasonably expect Owen Casey to contribute in the power department and just like as an overall player at the big league level?
I think he's going to end up being a pretty good power hitter. I just think it's going to come probably with a low average. I think Steamer has his projection around like a 230 hitter right now. I would say that's fair, And the other thing we've run into, think back to like early season PCA and even late 2023 PCA, where he was bad. He was a bad hitter. He's almost borderline unplayable from an offensive perspective. Like, that is somewhat consistent among a lot of prospects we've seen come up in baseball. Think of like Jackson Holiday, even like Wyatt Langford early in his career. Like, all these surefire guys struggled initially because the gap between AAA pitching and the major leagues is so massive. It's starting to widen even more and more, where you're just not seeing a lot of quality pitching in the minors. So I wouldn't be surprised if you get Owen Casey up and he struggles for like a month or two, where it's like a 38% strikeout rate. And he's still hitting bombs when he gets pitches middle, but really going to have to understand how to cover sliders down in, like changeups away. Like, breaking stuff is definitely something that he's probably going to have to lay off as much as possible to drive up the walk rate. I wouldn't say his discipline's terrible. Like, he walked, I think, above 10% of the time at AAA. I wouldn't be surprised if he struggles for a little. And I'm going to say this about any prospect that comes up over the next 3 to 4 years, 5 years. It's inevitable. So then you run into the perspective of how much tolerance do you have for a guy to struggle in a lineup? Because the only way you're going to get better is if you play every day. And for PCA, that was because he was such a good defender. The net of him as a player was neutral to positive enough to leave him in center and have him struggle offensively. Casey, to me, is more like an average-ish outfielder in right field. I would even say like maybe slightly below long term. I know he's improved a lot in the last couple of years, but I still don't think that's like a Gold Glove right fielder. He's got an arm, but I don't know if they're going to have tolerance for him to face left-handed hitters, etc. Like, he's going to have to play every day versus right-handed hitters or right-handed pitching. And right now, based on the current roster construction, I'm not exactly sure where he's getting those ABs through, which is maybe why we've seen some of the Cody Bellinger rumors about him not wanting to be traded. The organization wanting to trade him. I saw that from Rosenthal and Sahadev Sharma recently. So I don't know. Like, that's going to be a tough contract to trade, especially with his opt-in for 2026. Like, you're going to take pennies on the dollar to let Owen Casey struggle for 2 months. Like, I don't think that's going to look great. So it's a very tough situation for teams like this that are expected to win the division, but also have prospects that need to develop, and those guys need at-bats at the majors.
Yeah, and I think it'd be easier, obviously, if the Cubs were in a position where they're like a rebuilding position or weren't expected to win. Obviously, winning's a pretty big expectation for next year, and it's harder to be willing to do that with the prospect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do we see trades? Like, that's the big thing, Cody's like, how many prospects are they going to ship off for proven bat?
Yeah. But I like what you said about Owen Casey and like the possibility of the struggling the first couple months like we saw with PCA. And that brings me to Matt Shaw, because I think Matt Shaw is right there too. And the thing about Matt Shaw that makes it interesting is that he can play multiple positions. Like, the way that I view Matt Shaw going into next year is like kind of like Javi Baez in 15 and 16, where he kind of played all over the field, like as a utility player. And I know that he needs to get everyday at bats to get to that level like PCA did in terms of figuring out major league pitching. But I also like, how many more bats does he need at AAA? And also just the idea of having better options on the bench too, compared to what they have now. I think there's trying to weigh that out on what's the better route. Do you want him to get everyday at bats in AAA for however many more games, or do you want a better bench player who can play pretty much any infield position and maybe even corner outfield if you absolutely needed him to, which I doubt he would, considering how many outfielders they have. But that's just kind of what I've read about Shaw, is that he can be a really good utility type player, at least at the beginning here. But how do you get him to get those everyday at bats? Because like you said with PCA, the reason he adjusted was because he was playing every day. And I just feel like Shaw and Casey are very interesting in that aspect, because Casey was in AAA all of last season. How many more bats do you need to see him down there? And then Shaw, sure, maybe not in AAA as much, but he also was a college player. And I just think that I think his path could be a little bit quicker, but it's just a really tough situation, like you said. So I'm curious to what you think about Shaw and like that, the different positions he could potentially just be able to help the Cubs play, and how maybe that impacts at bats for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's second, third. And again, like both those spots have Paredes and Horner. So I agree with you. I don't exactly know where he plays or gets the ABs to round into the good hitter we think he is. Now, I do think a guy like Shaw might have better baseline value because of how much more contact oriented he is than a guy like Casey off the bat. So maybe his struggles won't be as bad. Like Casey can come up and maybe go for 20 and strike out 10 times, and you're like, whoa, okay, go back to AAA and like let's reset a little bit. Shaw, I would be more surprised if that happens to, where he's not going to hit 35 home runs. It's a really funky swing. I'm kind of fascinated to see where his leg kick goes over time. I know he adjusts a bit with 2 strikes, but it's a funky swing. Like there's not a lot of guys in Major League Baseball right now that swing like him. It's really closed off. I know he idolized Pedroia in his life, coming from the East Coast in Massachusetts and such, and I do see some similarities there. I know a lot of people can think of it like a Nico Horner. I just think it's a little bit different mechanically in terms of how he moves and how closed off he is. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I've said this before on other places, but I'd be very surprised if there's not like a substantial trade with the Cubs this offseason, whether that be a couple prospects in a major league or for another piece. It just seems so likely to me that they line up with another organization. I don't think it's totally likely that a guy like Bellinger gets moved. I see it much more likely that like a Horner and a prospect or 2 gets moved, which opens up Shaw at second, and you're willing to just be like, okay, figure it out for 2 months, and then you get back like a pitcher and a prospect. They feel like the perfect fit from a trade perspective. I've always said that they line up really well with the White Sox for Garrett Crochet. That would be like my dream. I know the Red Sox are always thrown into that puzzle right now because they have so many bats, but I said this last deadline, I was like, I would give like 2 or 3 prospects to get Garrett Crochet. I think that guy's like a top 2 or 3 pitcher in baseball. And I mean, I get the idea of having 3 lefties in a rotation is maybe not great, but I don't care. Crochet is like unbelievable in my opinion.
That's what I've said about Max Fried,
Well,
yeah.
And 2 things you said that I love to hear. 1, if I could have Dustin Pedroia 2.0, I'm in for that. And 2, Crochet, sure. We've been saying here on this podcast that it seems like pitching may be the route, even though we know it's the offense that needs maybe more improvement. Pitching may be the route for them to become elite at something. Like if you're looking for a spot where the Cubs could become elite, it doesn't look like it's going to be power. But it does look like your starting rotation could be elite if you add the right names to it somehow this offseason, and they don't seem as likely to spend a ton of money as they would be to finally potentially move some prospects and somebody else to try and go get that person. We're talking to the great Lance Brozdowski from Marquee Network. You can catch him there all the time. Channel 202 if you're looking at Xfinity, by the way, yep. All season long, all off season long. He's at Lance Braz on Twitter. We're going to talk to him more in just a second, but we do have to tell you about some of our great sponsors, starting with our friends over at ComEd, Sarah. Did you know? I don't know if Ryan probably knows this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Did you know that ComEd can help businesses save money by becoming more energy efficient?
You know, like Lance may have known that. I actually didn't know that until you just said
I didn't know
now.
that.
All right. And well, here's the deal. Yeah, the energy efficiency program can help find up to 35% in energy savings.
Whoa.
And when it's cold like this, you got to do it.
Whoa, 35% in energy savings? What does a business have to do to get that?
Just sign up for a free facility assessment at comed.com/biz.
If it's that easy, why aren't more businesses doing it?
I can only guess that they're either too cold right now in the snow or that they forgot the website.
Yeah, that might be true. Listen up, Lance. ComEd.com/biz. ComEd.com/biz. ComEd.com.
That's enough, Ryan. We get it.
We got it.
Terms and conditions apply. Offers are subject to change. Actual savings will vary by customer's energy usage and rate. The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program is funded in compliance with state law. You know, like, I think this is true of every sport, but especially basketball. Watching the games live in person, it's just a different experience. Like, Benny the Bull plays different when he's dumping the popcorn on your friend's head, right? As opposed to seeing it on TV. Or the Red Panda as they're stacking the bowls on our unicycle in front of your kids and they're going wild. The good news is that Game Time has tickets for all events, not just basketball. You can get your basketball tickets, but you can also get concerts and shows. Sebastian Maniscalco was at the United Center. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff so you can only see the incredible deals on great seats. You don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. They also have all-in pricing. That's a feature that shows the total up front. No surprise fees at checkout. Seat view, that's also important. They give you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy them. And then, of course, the low price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Right now, guarantee you, especially if the weather's like this, you can get some great deals on Bears tickets the rest of the season. The way they're playing, you want to take someone to go see their first Bears game, this is the time to do it. My Valpo basketball team will be taking on DePaul at Wintrust Arena at November 29th. I saw you could get a ticket for $1. What in the world can you do for $1? You can go to the Valpo DePaul game, the Duke of the Midwest.
Okay.
The Duke of the Midwest.
Duke and the Harvard of the Midwest.
No.
Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CHGO, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account, redeem code CHGO, $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it?
Game time.
Lance Brozdowski riding out the storm with us, our first winter storm of the season.
I'm no longer mad, but it was a very frustrating commute to get here.
It took me a while.
How long was it for you?
I topped out at maybe 30 miles per hour.
How long did
I
it
live
take you?
6.5 miles away from this building, which to a lot of people might not be a lot, but if you're in Chicago, that is far.
It's decently far, yeah.
I went 20 miles in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And I will be doing that going home.
How long were you actually on the road for, Lance?
Probably about 10 to 15 minutes.
Lance and I were driving so
got right.
slowly
Just got
that
down the block.
This ain't happening.
we were doing the most dangerous thing you could do. We're texting back and forth while we're driving. Why? Because we're going 1 mile an hour.
Yeah.
I sat still on the Kennedy for 15 minutes before my tires even moved.
I would have been here on time if Waze just was right.
Oh yeah, everybody was way off. Google Maps was off.
Waze told
Apple
me
Maps was
that,
off.
so basically telling you where I live and how I get here. But
Uh-oh.
I get on Foster Avenue and get on Lakeshore from there. Came all the way down. Waze told me to get on LaSalle. That's like Old Town.
Yeah.
Get on LaSalle. Take that all the way to Ontario. Took Ontario all the way to 90. And that's whenever
They told you to get on 90?
Yeah, and it
That's
told
a
me
mistake.
that it was
I should've-
clear. It told me it was clear.
Yeah.
And I get on there and it's
No way.
standstill
Yeah.
Hey,
cars.
you could have waved to me.
Yeah.
There's Luke.
And by the time I got to 90, it was like 11:10.
Brutal.
So,
Brutal.
and I don't know if my car's parked in a legal spot right now, too. So
Probably.
Hopefully.
They'll tow
We're,
it to
we're
complete our
good.
day.
Everything's all good, guys.
Hey, Lance, the other move that was made yesterday is it Thaiss from the Angels?
Thaiss, I believe. Is it Thaiss or Thaiss?
Thaiss or Thaiss? I'm not sure. The catcher from the
I don't know.
Oh,
yeah.
Check Baseball Reference quick.
Well, either way, we call him T-Money. What does he add to the picture? He's clearly a depth at catcher, but is there anything you can tell us about the addition? Because he's not a name like Yan Gomes was the end of his career, but Yan Gomes was at least a proven name. if you're looking for competition or at least sharing a role, I don't know a whole lot about this guy. Somebody to go with Amaya.
It is Thaiss.
I actually
by the
texted
way.
It is Thaiss. I was just about to say that too. Yeah, Thice is pronunciation there. So now we know.
Good job.
He unfortunately doesn't grade out super well as like a framer, which I was hoping to see better metrics there. Again, sometimes small sample, depends on the org, pitchers. There's a lot of variance there. So maybe the Cubs see something where they can unlock that. You know, they picked up Jerry Weinstein, right? The catching guru on Twitter who's all over the place. He used to work for the Rockies, so I always enjoy his tweets. So maybe that guy sees something. Maybe that guy wrecked Thaiss. Like, I have no idea. I do know from talking to someone who used to be with the Angels that Thaiss was really good on the game planning side. And I also kind of think the Angels are just a mess. So I'm in the mode of like that being an unlock is like when you get a guy out of there might just be a little boost from an interest in playing baseball a little bit harder perspective. No offense to Ron Washington, I love Ron Washington, but I just don't think that organization's too well run. So yeah, I mean, I think this is one of probably many moves. It kind of reminds me of like the Jorge Alfaro entering last year, where they just kind of built out a bunch of catching depth, where they have Kirk Casale, right, who they ended up kicking to the Giants at one point this season. He's one of probably many. What do they have? They only have one other catcher on the 40 man, right? So this is now their second catcher on the 40. So it's just a depth move from me. I will see. Like, I don't even. Does he get non-tendered on Friday? Like, I have no idea. I'm actually kind of fascinated to see.
Yeah, but it's not like, I mean, it's not a name that I even knew, but it also probably, for those of you that are at home thinking, oh, they're going to trade for that Hoppy deal is going to come back into play. I doubt they're trading you two of their catchers in one offseason. That would be really strange.
Well, we did give them the consideration of cash, Luke.
So just considered it.
The consideration of it.
Just considered it.
Straight cash.
No, yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned, he could possibly be non-tendered on Friday. Maybe they hold on and try to sneak him through waivers later in the offseason. Like, there's different ways for them to go about it, keeping him in the organization, not necessarily on the 40-man. But do you, I mean, what do you think? Like, this can't be it for how they address the catcher position, right?
No way. Yeah, there's got to be something else here. I know they feel like they've always been linked to Danny Jansen, right? That's always the name. Remember the last couple off seasons? That's been like, oh yeah, he's perfect to catch, 70 games, and Amaya catches 90. So I think they're still looking for like that puzzle piece, right? Like the pie is 162 games behind the plate. Amaya's taken 90 of them, maybe, and then you got to find another 70-ish there. And I'm not entirely sure whoever's doing that is on the roster, on the 40-man roster right now. So that's my take. Maybe Ballesteros catches some of those, but that guy, like, I'm fascinated to see what they think of him organizationally as a catcher. Of course, they're going to say, I think that, he's a great catcher. We project him as a catcher, but that's like, it kind of reminds me of like Vladdy Jr., where it was like he was coming up and it was like, he's a third baseman. I totally think he's a third baseman. He played 1 year there and we're like, he's never played third base again. It's like, I'm not saying that's going to happen to Ballesteros, but there's a chance that Ballesteros is not a catcher long term. And I think that's probably more likely than he is an 80 game catcher every single year for the rest of his career. But again, I'm fascinated to see what his off season development looks like, what he comes into spring as, what pitchers think of him. I hesitate a little on thinking the Cubs will give a really young catcher like that more than 50 games behind the plate this coming year on a staff that is, as Luke said, is like kind of going to be their differentiator, especially if they add in Eovaldi or someone else.
Yeah.
Eovaldi, that's you've dropped that name twice on us now, Lance. I caught it both times.
Makes a ton of sense to me.
It does. I think Buehler makes sense if the Dodgers make some moves, but the guy I really want to ask you about is Rōki. Like, if I'm dreaming top of the market now, because I've given up on the hopes that Corbin Burns is coming here, and I'm not so sure Fried is going to be in their price range. If they can convince Rōki to sign, what can you tell us about him? What are the huge upsides of this pitcher?
The huge upside is, number one, from just a surplus value perspective, which I know is like everyone's like rolling their eyes at, but that's how organizations think. Like, that's how front offices think. And I think we kind of have to get over it as a public when people think like this. But he's going to be really cheap. You have 6 years of control on him. He's not ARB eligible until his 4th year of control. Like, he's a very inexpensive pitcher relative to what he will perform as. Now, is he a guy who's going to give you like 150 innings right off the bat? I don't think so. Like, he's never eclipsed, I think, 110 or 120 in MPB. Run into, a weird ambiguous arm injury this most recent season. He tore an oblique, I believe, the prior year. He's like a really explosive dude. Like this is very different than Yamamoto and Imanaga in terms of just like what they are, their track record. Like both the track records of Imanaga and Yamamoto were better. They don't throw as hard. There's more pitchability. Rōki's like a shooting star. You know, it's like, let's see if we can capture this bottle and get it over 130 innings. Because if you do that, then it's electric stuff, you know. I think he's an interesting guy. I mean, I think that everyone's going to be in on him, and it's a matter of where he wants to go. The problem is just isolating off and trying to figure out what he wants, right? I thought there was a small chance he would have signed in this early window to get with an organization as quick as possible and kind of like have an entire offseason to figure out, you know, off-season programming, you know, what were you doing with Chibalote? Like, what can we get you on programming-wise to make sure your body will be able to hold up over 120 innings? Like, that kind of information ingestion is something that I do think is important. So now that he's presumably going to be posted in this later window, it's probably going to be a quick turnaround, right? Like, he's probably going to sign between the 15th of January and I'd say the 20th of January, just pure speculation on my side. Like, I think that's going to happen real quick, where it's like, a lot of this recruiting is probably going to happen in the offseason, and then like that day hits, he's signing, or a couple days later, he's signing to get into an org report really quick, and then he's going to have 2 months to ramp up. Fastball, slider, splitter. He doesn't spin the ball well. It's not like Yamamoto, where late in the season he was throwing these nasty sweepers up at 83 with like 2,800 RPM. Sasaki's slider had like sub 2,000 rotations per minute in MPB, which is not good. It's like 600 to 700 below what it is in the United States, and that's also a slightly tackier ball. So I think that does limit his what you call like spin capacity a bit. This isn't going to be a guy that's throwing 3 breaking balls and wiping out righties. This is a guy that's relying on his fastball and relying on a splitter to get outs. So I think he's going to be kind of a natural reverse splits guy where he's worse versus righties. But this is a high variance international player. Like I think there's a chance he's a closer in 4 years and he's absolutely electric. I think there's a chance that a good org can actually bottle him up and get him over 130, 150 innings, and he's consensus probably top 10, 15 pitcher in baseball. A lot of range of outcomes here. It's just the value you're getting on him. Like this kind of arm for this cheap is exceptional, and that's really what the bonus is. So even if he doesn't perform to Yamamoto's level, like the value return on what you're paying him is going to be far greater than what the Dodgers are paying Yamamoto.
On the topic, do you think that the Cubs hiring Tyler Zombro and collaborating with Next Base has anything to do with Rōki at all? Because I have talked myself
because it's a Japanese company too. Japanese company.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Next Base, a Japanese firm. Like, do you think that has anything to do with Rōki, or just the fact that they, they signed Shota last year. They got a relationship with Seiya as well. Like, it feels like they're trying to lure him in a way with trying to show that they care about pitching in a way that other organizations don't, I guess. I don't know. What do you think
to
on
take
that?
this conspiracy to another team, right? Like the Minute Maid Park just got renamed to, I believe it's Daikin Park, Japanese air conditioning manufacturing company. Like maybe the Astros are in on something here, you know? I'm just expanding the conspiracy theory. So I don't know.
Let me dream
I would say that
bit.
for the Cubs' sake, I think the biggest bargaining chip they have is that they have Seiya Suzuki and Shota Imanaga, right? Like that to me, you could probably add all these little peripheral pieces, but you have both those guys. That's probably your bargaining chip. Like if you're pitching to them, you probably have some kind of personalized message from both those guys that's like, hey, come here, you'll love it. The city's amazing, 120s are the best, etc. And then the same thing's gonna happen with the Padres and Yu Darvish and the Dodgers with Shohei and Yamamoto, etc. So like those teams definitely have an advantage, in my opinion, from just a fit perspective, like a culture fit perspective. So I think that's the biggest edge the Cubs have. As to, I don't know, like, is there a market with probabilities on like where he's going to go? The Dodgers got to be the favorite, but the next group of teams probably like the Padres, maybe the Yankees, Giants. Like I'm trying to think of who else is up there. I haven't seen any like
Mariners
handicapping
just
around like
because
what
it's
exactly
West
it is.
Coast.
That's a good one. Yeah, Mariners makes sense. They also have a bazillion pitchers, though, right? Like, what are they? Is he going to be? They're going to go to 6-man? Like, I'd want Kirby and Gilbert starting every 5th day. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think I definitely think the Cubs have built up their reputation, not necessarily as a pipeline for Japanese players, but like as a place Japanese players can go find comfort, find success. I mean, you look at like even Ohtani, the Cubs were the only non-AL team, so non-West Coast team that also wasn't an AL team, so they couldn't offer the DH. So it was like two disadvantages right there, and still got a meeting with them. I think they've built up that reputation a little bit, where they do have a shot for. They do have one of the better shots among teams that you might name. I think the Dodgers, like you said, probably are the presumptive favorite, but outside of that, like the Cubs feel like they have as good a shot as anyone else.
I think I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about? Go ahead.
And I was gonna ask when Cody mentioned Zombro, the hire that happened was that a few days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I saw you tweet that this is a game-changing hire for a pitching department. What about Zombro? What makes you say that? What is it about him that makes you say this is a game changer for the Cubs pitching department?
Listen, I think that when you have two of the best third-party organizations and not affiliated with a major league team, would be Driveline Baseball and Trade Athletics. Those are the two in terms of like where you go off-season training if you're an elite athlete, elite pitcher, and you want to get better. At the top of those two organizations, there used to be a guy named Bill Hazel, who's now with the Miami Marlins, who I mentioned in that same tweet. He's now the director of pitching there. That's a game-changing hire, in my opinion. Whenever you have these two organizations, someone at the top, go to an org, that is huge in my perspective. And Zombro, alongside Ben Brewster there, were the two top guys at Trade Athletics from a programming standpoint, from a pitch design standpoint, from a working with major league athlete standpoint. Just scroll through Zombro's Twitter. Those are the people he's retweeting or those he's worked with: Jason Foley, Bryce Miller, Jordan Montgomery, just a ton of guys, like a very good major league pitchers he has made better and made substantive changes with. That alone is enough track record. He's also just a really sharp dude. Like I've DM'd him a bunch. We've talked this a lot this season, actually. Whenever I would like notice something, I love when the more you tweet stuff out, that's kind of hot takey occasionally, or like, hey, I noticed this change and no one else had it. Oftentimes you'll get like whoever's worked with that player, like a DM, and it's just like, oh, actually we did this because of this. Or I get corrected, which is my favorite because then I learned something from that. So my understanding is Zombro's in that role to almost be like a communicator between the front office and field level. I don't think that's like a minor league role. I think that's a major league role where he's helping on the acquisition side. He's helping cover blind spots of Moskos and Hadavi, et cetera. He's another really smart pitching mind in there to help give feedback to their pitchers to make them better. And we saw Jameson Tynan working with Ben Brewster at Trade Athletics as well. So I imagine there was some interaction there already between potentially some Cub athletes and stuff. So I love him. Like, he's a really good dude. He was one of the guys that I was surprised for a while wasn't already with a major league org. The best guys are the ones that continually get scooped up and go to major league orgs. And Zombro is like one of the, probably, if you were trying to project who the next people are to jump from those organizations, Zombro is one. Chris Langan from Driveline's probably the other one there. Who's a director of pitching with Driveline Baseball. Like, I'm surprised that guy doesn't have a major league job yet. But that's like, I just think it's really good when you get a third party guy at the top into an org because they know a lot that maybe the organization doesn't. He can also then learn a lot from being inside an org. He was a pitcher. He has a crazy story. I encourage you to read Jeff Passan's piece on him. Just a good dude, and I think he's really sharp. He's taught me a lot. So I'm biased there, but I like him.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, anytime you can keep adding smart voices to the organization, it's a good move. Just like adding good players. We've been talking about adding a superstar. I don't know that adding that superstar player is coming this offseason. I don't know if the Cubs are counting on PCA developing into that player. Eventually, you have to have superstar players. If they're just going to add from the mid to mid good, like, you know, if you're taking the next level above that for offseason because of finances, where do you rank your dream list? If it's trading for Crochet, if it's signing Buehler, if it's signing Uvalde, if it's another pitcher I'm not thinking of at the moment, where would your wish list be right now for what would help the Cubs the most?
I would take any of the big pitchers. I love Corbin Burns. I think kind of the regression of him has been a little bit overrated. It seems like the Orioles and Dodgers are the favorites there from the tweets I've seen, but like, who knows? Like, this stuff can swing pretty quickly. Burns would probably be my one. Free would be my two. Sasaki is an obvious one, but again, you're not paying a lot there. So like any team could tack that onto their offseason and make it look a lot better. So I'd say Fried and Burns have the biggest impact on this team from a win now, how many games are you winning in 2025 perspective. You get more interesting, again, with the bats. Like, obviously Soto would help, you know, like, duh. And I think if you look at a lot of the other top bats too, they would help. But when you bring in a guy like that, like, if you look at the major league roster right now, there's not playing time. Like, I don't know where these guys fit. Like, I'd take Anthony Santander. That'd be great. Like, that dude hits tanks, you know? He actually has a really similar batted ball profile to a guy like Owen Casey at AAA. It's just Santander's actually done it at the major league level, which is a huge differentiator, obviously. But Santander would be great. If you're giving me a blank check, give me Burns and give me Santander, and your team is better. Your team is objectively better. You should win that division. You know, as to what realistically happens, again, it just seems likely to me that there's some trade here. I don't exactly know what the structure would be. I think you have to try to figure out how to open up in middle and not middle infield spots, second or third, and get back a pitcher and let Shaw go for it. You know, like that to me makes the most sense where you're not maybe spending a ton of money, you know, which seems to, I don't want to say be hesitation of the org, but you know, they're not looped into Soto. I doubt. I'd love for them to get Burns, but I don't see discussions there. So you're immediately going down then to the second tier where they don't want to spend maybe more than $18 million AAV on a pitcher, which lines them up with an Eovaldi type, which is why I mentioned him. It doesn't have a qualifying offer attached as well, which is another reason. So that's how I think about it. Like I don't think they're going to unload the checkbook. So in order to make this team better, you have to make a trade. And I don't know what it looks like, but it's probably for some kind of pitcher. And I pray that pitcher is Garrett Crochet.
There you go.
Why would I mean? Obviously, he is, like you said, a lefty. Why do you think he would fit? Other than being a really good pitcher, especially last year, why would he fit this team specifically well?
I mean, I like the idea of stacking lefties. I know there might be some hesitation on it where it's like, no, you can't, like, you're going to not match up well with a team that's loaded on the right-handed side. But you want to go like Galaxy brain on this? I was looking at some people in the Marquee office about this. I think 3 of the other 4 teams in the NL Central were bottom 10 or 15, or I think it was bottom 10 in left-handed performance versus left-handed pitching. So if you really want to game this, right, give me like 4 lefties in the rotation and rip through everybody in the NL Central and just dominate the division, you know? And then you do what the Royals and the Guardians did, where you just absolutely boat race the White Sox and then you end up in the playoffs. And then anything can happen in the playoffs. I just think you take on variance when you have basically 3 lefties, maybe even ends up being 4 if they want to throw Wicks at a certain period of time. You know, you go Shota, Steele, Max Fried / Crochet, like 3 very good left-handed pitchers, all slightly different looks. So I don't think there's any like, you know, Fried and Steele have very similar fastball shapes, and I've wondered whether those guys, even if you split them up in a series, you go like Steele, Shota, Fried, like Fried and Steele's fastballs are so similar. I wonder whether it takes away from each of them to have a similar fastball. But Crochet's is more like a carry. He's just added a sinker late in the year too, which is like already one of the best sinkers in baseball because he throws it really hard. Like that guy's just so polished as a pitcher to me. It's just, he's a game changer. Like you look at projections already and he's projected as a top 3 pitcher in baseball. Like you're telling me you can add a top 3 pitcher in baseball. You know, maybe you extend him. Obviously, that's the concept there, is to try to extend him. But you don't have to pay Yamamoto level money to get him. You can trade prospects for him, and you have a surplus of position prospects to do so. And I really think he only lines up with like 3 teams. I think he lines up with the Orioles, the Red Sox, and the Cubs. I guess the Dodgers, again, are on everything, but I just think that those 3 teams make a lot more sense from what the White Sox need, which are bats. And the Cubs have a ton. You know, Alcantara, give him like Alcantara, Ballesteros, and another piece or 2, and take back Crochet and another our major league arm. I don't know if there's anyone there on the major league staff that's remotely interesting aside from Crochet, but I mean, there's some concept of a deal there that makes a lot of sense for the Cubs to win this year and next year, and I think it revolves around Crochet.
You're gonna get people angry throwing those names out there, Lance.
For Crochet, though,
I mean, come on, where are those guys playing at the major league level in the next 2 years?
I don't even disagree with you. I'm just saying, like, it's very funny how a lot of people are like, "Oh, the Cubs need to shake the roster up a bit. They need to do something to make the team better." But then when you throw out a name of who to trade, the pitchforks come out, and they say you want to trade all the good young players, right? So no, you are correct. I think that's the only way. And I said that before the offseason started. That like what are they going to do with the prospects? I guess with that, like, who's the one prospect you wouldn't trade? Who's the absolute one that you would absolutely? He's untouchable for you in the system right now.
I think the major league team probably only has a couple untouchables. If you consider a PCA still a prospect, he's definitely untouchable. But let's go to the level below that, like non-major league roster. I think Shaw is pretty much the only one that I probably wouldn't trade, and that's because the immediate like fit there makes the most sense to me. Where it's if you want to upgrade over Horner, or if something happens to Paredes and he really can't find it this year, I think he would be an upgrade in both those spots. You know, he's at least an average defender. I think there's a lot of upside in the bat. I think it's going to be good OBP, good average. We'll see what pop he runs into. He's got like a really inside out swing, so he goes the other way a lot. So I don't think he's going to run into like a bunch of pop going to right center at Wrigley Field as a right-handed hitter. But I think if you were to put an untouchable tag on anybody, it's probably Shaw. For the reasons of fit and the fact that I think the bat's really projectable.
All right. Yeah. Fair enough.
Good stuff. All right, Lance, we're gonna cut you loose because I know you've been on a long time with us. We appreciate it. You tried to drive here. That was enough. That we sent you back in the snow again, the other direction, into the snow again. That was enough. And then you stayed on a long time. We really appreciate it. Tell us about stuff at Marquee anything you want to tell us about. First of all, Twitter, you're at Lance Braz, right?
Yes, sir.
What are some of the next shows coming up at Marquee? What are you guys excited about?
Yeah. Tuesdays and Fridays, we have Cubs 360 off-season shows, which are live. I usually am on Tuesdays. Elise and Bruce and myself, along with Cole. We're basically recapping similar to what we did here, talking through the moves, what we want to see, et cetera, and reacting to anything. We have 2 Bears shows a week, Bears Den and Bears Essentials. Tom Waddle is awesome. Robbie Gould's really cool. So there's a lot of value if you hop over to MarqueeSportsNetwork.com, check out the app. We have a lot of cool programming for the offseason. And I think we're going to do some cool stuff next year. I'm excited. I don't want to spoil everything that we're going to do, but there's going to be some cool stuff. Probably more minor league programming. Hopefully I'll be using in a variety of capacity at the major league level as well. So yeah, it's good stuff.
All I'll say is just keep Cliff Floyd on there. Do not let Cliff Floyd off the
Cliff
set.
is the man. Yes.
He has become one of my favorite analysts on Marquee for postgame.
Calls it like it is.
So yeah,
he's one of my favorite to work with too. That dude is sharp. He's willing to entertain my nerd BS that I pick up, if I'm being honest, which I like. Yeah. Sometimes the talent's I don't really know. I don't really care about barrel rate. Cliff's tell me why it's good. Tell me what my barrel rate was. And I was I can't, unfortunately.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Lance. Hopefully we can do this again sometime. You good with that?
That'd be great.
All right.
Of course.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Brozdowski. We appreciate it, Lance.
Thanks, Lance.
See ya.
That was a fun show. He hit everything, man. I love the stuff he had to say about Rōki. I love what he said about Shaw. The Morgan stuff was interesting because I don't know that it's a name everybody knows around Major League Baseball.
No.
I saw somebody describe it on Twitter as a star reliever. I don't know if I'd go that far.
Yeah. Because
I think there's very few relievers, but Lance has a very detailed, very researched and stats-backed view on a lot of guys.
Yeah. I think the way I would, close it out with the Morgan thing, because we didn't really talk about it yesterday, is he's got a lot of, as Lance was saying, he can do some multi-inning stuff. He was mostly a middle reliever. I was looking, most of his innings have come 5th, 6th, 7th, I think. It feels like he's going to be a guy, I don't want to necessarily say Mark Leiter Jr., just because Mark Leiter Jr. was specifically their lefty guy, but it feels like a guy where he's going to be used in a lot of different innings, a lot of different situations. Well, situation-based, but and whether that comes in the 5th inning or maybe it comes in the 8th inning, a guy that's not specifically a set time of the game is we need you to go get some outs for us right now. This is the situation we need you in. Feels like that may be how Craig Counsell goes about using him.
I guess on the flip side of the trade itself, I saw a lot of I was actually surprised by this, but a lot of people were upset about giving away Alfonso Rosario.
Yeah, that's what Lance was saying.
He's
too.
A high upside prospect, but at some point you gotta.
I just don't know how he fits in with the Cubs, and maybe I could be more upset about moving a piece like that and not getting more, maybe a more, a reliever with more with a higher K rate.
Mm-hmm.
Again, his K rate came down the last couple of years. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know anything about Alfonso Rosario, other than when I was looking at his Instagram, the guy's got a ton of swag. But other than that,
so do I. But you don't need
clearly
to
has
organization.
What I've read about the guy, what the videos I've watched.
A capable reliever with your swag.
Sure.
He's got great power, but he's got a lot of holes in the swing. He strikes out a ton.
He's an upside guy, but.
Yeah. He was a 6th-round pick in the 2023 draft. So, the Cubs obviously liked him for certain reasons.
Yeah.
We do want to point out that Corey and Brennan will have a podcast tomorrow. And don't forget that the non-tender deadline is coming up, too. So you might start to see more moves heading again into the weekend, and the roster could change just a little bit. And we'll keep you posted. We'll be here online, social media, everywhere. Keep it right here, CHGO Sports. Thanks to everybody in the live YouTube chat that was here today. Just better to stay home, right? So
Sunday.
why not hang out with us?
Sunday is Barb's birthday.
Barb's turning 85 on Sunday, and we got the tailgate going again for Bears Vikings.
And if you're a diehard, you get 20% off that.
Diehards, yeah, that's right, they do.
Yep.
20% off that. You get 20% off everything. You get 20% off the merch. You get Ryan's newsletter. You get all those great things. And, of course, you get the diehard card, which is hopefully going to get me home faster. I can just flash it to the police, and they'll be like, right this way, Mr. Stuckmeyer. So that's what I'm going to try. Thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast. Thanks to our guest, Lance Brozdowski. 3 of us will see you next week. And until then, thanks for watching, and fly the W.
We all silly like the mayor.